Everyone. This is a presentation on corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility helps to drive business growth, and I'm going to explain it in more detail in the next slides. Definition of CSR. Corporate social responsibility seeks to define how a company manages a specific industry it is involved in and how it accounts for the social impact of some of the decisions and actions it takes. It is very important to note that customers and shareholders are the key players when it comes to CSR decisions, and companies need to take their views into account. In one of the readings from this week's articles, it talks about how in most companies you have the top level management, like the CEOs and the business executives. They don't really look at social responsibility the way that customers and stakeholders look at social responsibility, because eventually it's the customer that's the end user, whether it's a product or an idea. So when you have a company that is involved in unethical and CSR practices that are not attuned to giving back to the planet or helping the environment, and then the customers that consume that product or idea are going to want more accountability from the company. So what has caused a shift in CSR practices is the fact that we're now living in a more globalized world, and information travels as fast as the speed of light sometimes. So if a company makes a bad decision, let's say in India, the customers in America are going to know about it maybe even 20, 30 minutes later. I would even say 5 minutes later, because it's just a matter of someone taking a video or a photo and just posting it on a social media website just to show maybe if a company is involved in unethical practices. Maybe they're not paying their workers well, or maybe the workers are working under conditions that are not, ethical, like sweatshops. If you're buying products that are produced from sweatshops, or if you're buying a product that's not ethically sourced, where the raw materials are not ethically sourced, and where you have slave labor or child labor, then you're contributing to unethical causes. And this causes consumers to force companies to change their production and marketing strategies to fit in line with CSR objectives. So the Friedman principle looks at corporations as having a social responsibility for profit only. So when Friedman wrote this article, I think it was back in the 1970s or something, he was kind of looking at the issue of social responsibility not to be left to companies. Yes, if you're a solo business owner, like you're running your own business and you want to give back to a social cause, yeah, it's up to you. Friedman looks at that like, well, it's your own money. You can give it for social justice. But if you have a company that maybe has gone public and has an IPO, and their bottom line are the shareholders. So the shareholders are basically looking to get a dividend from the company. Like they're expecting, like, hey, I bought some shares maybe for like $30. I'm expecting at the end of the year maybe to have about $32 a share or $33 a share so I can make some profit. You see, the bottom line is that all businesses are doing business to make money. But like Friedman says, is that money and profit should be the only motivation that a business has. And this principle does not apply in the business environment that we're having right now, where the nature of consumers and producers has changed. We have to move towards a more sustainable and ethically, and we have to move towards a more sustainable and ethical way of doing business. Because without that, we're not going to have a planet to live on. If businesses are just doing what they want without any regulation, then there's going to be a lot of abuse. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be happening that are going to affect not only the environment, but the health of people, the species, and also the planet as a whole. So this view is slowly changing as more companies are trying to incorporate social responsibility programs into the work that they do. So the prompt told us to see how an individual can incorporate CSR into a company while at the same time balancing out the Friedman principle of profits. Now, the company that I'm going to be looking at as a case study is Patagonia, and the specific individual that I'm going to be talking about is Yvonne Chouinard. I'm reading a book on servant leadership about Let My People Go Surfing, Patagonia, where Yvonne tries to have a company, he tries to run the company in an equitable way. And his leadership is more of democratic and a little bit, I would say, laissez faire. He allows his employees to do what they want, while at the same time having a knack for the actual reason as to why they're in business. Like I said before, every company is in business to make money. But the reason Patagonia stands out from other companies is that Patagonia tries to ensure that part of the reason as to why they're in business is to make sure that they leave a much healthier planet than they found. Because a lot of businesses that are running business right now don't really have a sense of the effects that things like pollution and environmental sustainability have on the health of the planet and also for the customers, the people that buy your products. If you don't have a healthy planet, you're not going to have healthy people. So basically, Yvon Chouinard has made it his life's goal for Patagonia to be an environmentally sustainable company while at the same time charging high prices for good quality clothing. And this ensures that they're able to make money, and the extra money that they make, they can give it back to the communities that they serve. So the clothing industry is involved in a lot of the problems that we face today with the climate crisis, especially when it comes to the ethical sourcing and production of products. Patagonia made it a point to try and source organic cotton for its products instead of the conventionally grown cotton that was grown by most companies in the clothing industry that was filled with dangerous chemicals like formaldehyde and was causing employees to get ill. Now Patagonia reached a point where they realized that buying the same cotton as other clothing companies was not going to cut it because most of the cotton that was being grown was being treated with so many chemicals to make the harvesting process easier, faster, and it was causing a lot of side effects, not only for the human beings, but also for the soil and for the climate surrounding where this industrially grown cotton was being sourced from. So Patagonia made an ethical decision, and it was basically a social responsibility decision that a company makes to switch from a product that may be causing harm to a much more expensive option of sourcing organic cotton despite the price and despite the hardships in processing organic cotton. They decided to make the switch to organically sourced raw material to make sure that their employees were not affected and to also make sure that the planet and the environment was not affected. So that's a big up for Yvonne. That's basically how an individual can make the decision like, look, I know it's going to be expensive, but let's make the switch, use better quality products, and in the long term, people are going to start trusting our stuff. People are not going to have a problem spending 300 bucks buying a nice jacket compared to like the $60 jacket that's much cheaper, but it's not ethically sourced. Now, I'm not saying that everything that's cheap is not good, but most of the times when something is very cheap, you have to be very cautious about it. Yeah, once in a while you can get a good deal, but really, when you spend extra money for a product, there's a reason as to why you're spending extra money for it. And that's what makes the difference between, let's say, Versace, Ralph Lauren, Armani Exchange, and some Chinese dollar store shirt that you just buy for like 10 bucks. There's a difference. It might look the same as a name brand, but the quality and the sourcing of the raw materials for that product is what matters. So an ethical decision was made to switch to organic cotton. So conventionally grown cotton with pesticides and machines is much cheaper to source, and this makes it cheaper for the producer and savings for the consumers. But this is just short term, like I said in the previous slide. Now, long term, the individuals that are involved in harvesting this cotton grown with pesticides and chemical sprays will get exposed to sickness and cancers that will actually reduce their productivity and their capacity. And also would be potential customers for your product might actually get affected. And this is long term. When you're sourcing products that are not ethically produced, it's going to shorten the lifespan of not only your customers but also of your business. Now, the farming communities staying near these environments will also experience negative effects on their soil and crop harvest due to cheap chemically produced cotton. So sometimes, again, like I said in the previous slide, when you do things in a cheap way, it might save you money, but long term, the company that invests in a sustainable solution is actually going to gain much better publicity and much better revenues over a long term compared to the short term profits that most companies are just looking for. So Patagonia as a company realized that the cotton that they were sourcing was not ethically grown and thus made the switch to organic cotton despite the increased costs and manpower needed to sort and process this cotton. The importance of being aware of where your raw materials are sourced and how they're produced and the effects that the conversion process has on the staff producing the material is very critical and important for the organization seeking positive CSR goals. And this comes out of the Let My People Go novel by Chenard that he wrote in 2005. This is where I got this quote from. So this slide over here tries to show how Yvon Chouinard as an individual and Patagonia as a company try to have a balance between making money and actually being socially responsible to the people and the stakeholders that are involved in the process of making their products and also consuming their products. So Patagonia is in the business of selling clothing, gear, and equipment for climbing and outdoors, and they have to be able to make a profit so they can stay afloat in business. But Yvon, as an individual, realized the need to give back towards environmental social justice causes, and this is why the company, Patagonia, donates about 10% of the profits before taxes to causes that encourage environmental activism. It might be costing Patagonia hundreds of millions of dollars to do the right thing in the short term, but they understand that the future customer and stakeholders will want to do business with companies, organizations, and industries that have foresight for the climate and environment that we live in and how sustainable production, sourcing, and consumption are critical for the future of a company's success and long-term growth. Most of the millennials and Gen Zs right now that are growing up are very, very, very aware about the effects that the past industrial age has had on the environment. We can see it, we can feel it. The hot days, the hot seasons are getting really hot, and the rain, like for those of us that stay down the southern hemisphere, the rainy season is no longer is becoming very unpredictable. And when you're a company that's involved in environmental degradation, yeah, you might be making money, but think about what you're doing to the rest of the other people that don't don't even stay near the industry that you're involved in. They're getting affected. When a farmer cannot get harvest from the seed that they plant because a chemical from maybe a chemical treatment plant or some chemicals that are being released by a clothing manufacturer is affecting the water. Or maybe when fishermen cannot be able to fish in the river because someone is dumping chemicals and chemical waste from industries into the water because it's much cheaper to dump the industrial chemical waste illegally, and it's much cheaper to do it like that than to actually dispose of the waste in a much more environmentally friendly manner. It costs money to recycle some of these chemicals. So a lot of industries, especially in developing countries in the global south, you find a lot of these factories that are just dumping all the chemical waste from the plant or the factory right into the river. Maybe if you're involved in making clothes, like the Patagonia example, if you're dyeing clothes, what happens to all those unused dyes and all the chemical waste from the dyeing process? If you don't have people that are empowered and actually know what they want, industries are going to get away with all these bad practices. They're going to make their money, they're going to move out, and the local population that is in that place is going to end up suffering the consequences of it. And this is where Patagonia makes a difference. They make sure that the people that they serve, the places where their industries are located, and the people that help them source their raw materials are taken care of by taking care of the environment, basically. So this is basically like a summary. Cotton that is grown conventionally causes a lot of negative side effects, which might not be felt by consumers, but by farmers who grow other crops. And the example that I'm going to talk about here is about the bees. Bees are essential to the food chain, and their reduction in numbers causes a negative imbalance that might lead to lower yields and thus food insecurity. When there's food insecurity, there's usually going to be political upheavals, there's going to be infighting, there's going to be fighting, there's going to be misunderstandings. When people don't have food, which is being caused by climate change, and that's why you have a lot of climate refugees. People leave their homes and their livelihoods and their communities because they're not able to practice any conventional kind of farming because the land has been depleted of resources. So when you continue buying conventionally chemically treated cotton products, you might be saving money in the short term, but it will affect the environment in the long term. And that is why a highly priced cotton shirt made from organically grown and certified farms might be expensive, but you are paying a premium and contributing towards climate equity and justice. So yeah, the Patagonia sweatshirt or the sweater or maybe the jacket, it might be highly priced, but you know that when you're paying that money, it's not going to go towards contributing to the salary for the CEO. Yeah, it's not bad for a CEO to make a lot of money, but when you're at the top level of management, you need to realize you don't need that much. Okay? Money is good, but make sure that you use it for the right thing. So if your company is making profits, why don't we give back, 10% of what we made back to the environment? And help the farmers, help the factory workers, and all the people along the production chain so that people can actually feel an impact with the company. But when a CEO gets all that money and just puts it in like some kind of, trust or investment, the people that are involved in like the lowly work, like the producers, the farmers, the factory workers, will not be able to feel the effects of some of the monies that are being kept by the top level. I'm not saying that, again, I'm not trying to say that it's bad for a CEO or a CFO or a COO to get paid a lot of money. They're actually doing something for the company. They actually have intellect, they have intelligence, they have a skill that is needed by the company. Okay? And everyone with a different pay grade. There's a reason that's why we have pay grades. But it's not natural for a CEO to be taking home $20 million, $30 million a year, and a factory worker in Peru or Argentina or China that is making the products that the CEO actually um, identifies with is making close to like $5 an hour or even maybe $10 a day. So that disparity in income is what causes some companies to just think about profit being the bottom line. But when you have top level management that are willing to sacrifice, like, hey, I'm not going to take a paycheck of $30 million this year. I'm going to take a paycheck of $6 million. And the $24 million, I'm going to put it towards environmental justice. I want to make sure that the people that are producing our products are catered for so we can have a sustainable company in the long term. Not only will you be doing yourself a favor, but you will be doing the future generations a favor, and you will be doing everyone around you a favor. And the company can grow much more organically just like that. So the conclusion is it is very important for organizations and businesses to understand that their responsibility is not to the customer or shareholder or profits, but it is to the environment and society in which they do business. Because without the environment, as Yvonne mentions in his book, you won't have customers and you won't have shareholders and you will not have business. So you have to, the main objective of business, the actual like thing that they're responsible to is the environment. That's the first thing that they have to take care of. And that is why Yvon Chouinard and Patagonia make sure that they give justly towards environmental justice. So if we have more individuals who aspire towards environmental activism and climate justice, then more companies will try to listen to what their customers, and most importantly, the planet, is telling them.